Welcome to Math Connects Latin America. Math Connect LATAM is our chance, once again, to bring together some of the key players in a market, and so many of our members are active in Latin America. It might be easier to think of Latin America as a smaller secondary market, but our member remind us that it's not so. Not just because it is huge, 650 million people in LATAM between the Hispanics and the Brazilian markets. But also it's a question of the idea, the creativity that comes out of Latin America for mobile itself. We have seen it over the years and we're seeing much more. As MEF specifically, we've been witnessing a lot because we have an office in the region, and we've been enjoying so much of the things that have happened. As always, there are ups and downs in any market, and we have seen an economic contraction recently in Latin America, but one that has not yet stopped the creativity again in the mobile markets. And so here we go. We are now seeing incredible amount of interest and incredible amount of growth in the mobile markets. And in the next few days, you will see some of that excitement, some of that creativity in our chats, in our meetings, in our discussions with the different players. So that's great to have you here. And that's great to be here. Once again, Math has been for so long and will continue being a player to get together some of the people, some of the companies in this incredible geography. So whether you are outside of Latin America or whether you're deep down in one of those countries and one of those markets, we want to be able to make sure that you get the right connection and understand who is there, what is happening in these markets. So stay tuned. And by the way, just to make sure that we do stay true to what we said, we just published a report as well on the Brazilian market. So in case you're looking for some of the insight on some of the interactions, some of the initiatives as we've been doing for so long, well, Math is probably your house for Latin America. And do come and speak to us. Now, Carol, you will hear more from her later. She's your first port of contact for so many things that we do here at Math. But similarly, we have a growing team of many more people over the next few months. You're going to get to know some of the new addition of our team as well. So that's plenty of excitement from Math, from this market, and I'm now going to be listening to all the excitement coming from you as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello, and Dario, thank you very much for that warm welcome. My name is James Williams, Director of Programs with MEF, and a very warm welcome, as Dario just said, to day 2 of MEF Connects LATAM. Today's focus is all about the country of Brazil. Now, Dario mentioned there were about 650 million people in Latin America, and approximately 30% of that rather large population is in Brazil alone. So Brazil is a very, very robust, fast-growing market. Now, I personally was there 20 years ago. That was the last time I was there in Sao Paulo. And I look forward very much, hopefully sometime sooner rather than later, given MEF's presence in Brazil, to be back there. First of all, a little thank you to Carol. Dario mentioned Carol, but indeed Mitch, Susan, Jesse, Jonathan Vincent, Sam and Eva, and everyone involved in putting this event together. Yesterday was a great day in terms of fantastic content. Thanks to all our speakers. And I look forward very, very much today to actually being a speaker myself. Now, talking about speakers, I'd now like to introduce Mr. Gustavo Victorica. Gustavo, hey, hi.
Hey, James.
No problem. You're drinking water like me. I drink a lot of water. A very, very warm welcome. Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Pleasure to be talking here.
No problem. So you're one of the 3 co-founders and CEO of RecargaPay, which has been around.
Actually, COO, sorry.
COO, and one of the 3 co-founders of RecargaPay. And you've just been through a Series C funding round for $70 million. That was back on February the 24th, I think that was announced. So it's safe to say you are expanding rapidly in the world of payments. You had a website, you moved to the app world, and your focus really is Brazil. And I love the title of your presentation, The Mobile Payments Landscape in Brazil. So take it away, Gustavo, and thank you very much.
Great, thanks, James. Thank you very much for the intro. Let me just, a very, very brief introduction by myself. As you said, I'm one of the co-founders and COO at RecargaPay. I'm also a board member. Formerly, I was the CFO of the business for over 10 years. I've been doing business in Brazil for over 13 years now. And we've raised, together with that 70 million round this year, we raised a total of over $100 million in venture capital. And I've scaled the operation of over 400 people in Brazil. And my background is in economics, but I've always been working on business and operation. So a brief intro about RecargaPay and why I can talk a little bit about mobile payments landscape in Brazil is we are a mobile money ecosystem offering disruptive financial services in Brazil. So we're simplifying the payment methods for pretty much essential payments for people in Brazil. And we're doing this by offering a full suite of very cost-efficient solutions via a digital wallet with a prepaid card integration, with integration to Pix, the instant payment system of Brazil, which I'll talk a little bit later in Brazil. We also have the full suite of digital payments, financial services, and also merchant tools. But I don't want to spend a lot of time about RecargaPay. I want to talk a little bit today about the ecosystem. And again, depends on how knowledgeable you are about Brazil. This is a very, very complex ecosystem, and I try to simplify it a little bit. So please bear in mind that this is a simplification of a very, very complex ecosystem. So just a little bit of history, right? So 2 years ago, there were 550 fintech companies in Brazil, spread out in the different segments like means of payment, credit, back office, compliance, personal finances, crowdfunding. So a lot of different players. And you can see the growth here in almost tenfold in the last 5 years. So a lot of growth. But then it exploded. So in just 2 months, in just 18 months, this grew 2x. So we're now talking about almost 1,200 startups working in the different angles of fintech. So this is a super complex market. And why is this? Why so many people are going after this? It's because the banks are making a killing out of it. So the fifth largest banks in Brazil are earning in revenue just from products and financial services almost 500 billion, that's with a B, reais a year. And this is just the banks, right? So the market is massive. And of course, if you can see here these numbers, about 30% of what banks are making in revenue is just from fees, right? So this is very, very interesting market for a lot of different players to get at it. And so you can see the competition is the name of the game. And this is, again, just those 1,200 companies spread out. This used to be a slide, this company called Distrito, they're being mining the different fintechs in the ecosystem for quite a few years. And it used to be that you could see the names of the companies. Now this is so massive and it's even 2 pages long. It's impossible just to figure out who is who, right? So again, this is a very complex ecosystem. And of course, it's attracting a massive amount of funds flowing into the region. These are numbers from just first half of this year. We've had a massive amount of 880 deals, almost $8 billion invested in the region. This is doubling what was done last year. So again, massive amount. And of course, Brazil is the absolute leader. So 80% of those investment is concentrated in Brazil. Mexico and Colombia are following very, very far behind. And then the rest is just negligible. If you see, again, Brazil is the powerhouse in fintech. And that has to do, again, with this amount of money that is on the table because of the concentration of services in the big traditional banks. And so given this, I sort of the message that I wanted to give out today is what have we learned, what happened in this last 18 months with this massive amount of growth in different players, and of course, with the global pandemic in the middle. And I'm going to focus in three topics here. So the main drivers of changes, and I'm not going to talk about secular trends of cash is going mobile, but I think everybody knows about that in this audience. So I'm going to focus in three things: is how COVID affected mobile payments, how government aid, which was called Auxílio Emergencial in Brazil, how that also changed how people relate to money and payments, and finally, how instant payments, which is called PIX in Brazil, also is bringing massive amount of changes and disruption in the market, and then a little bit of what's coming after that in the market. So before COVID, we always said that cash is king in Brazil, right? Cash was king. Cash transactions were growing, as you can see here in this report from McKinsey, growing in share in total transactions, 45 million unbanked people. That's the population of Argentina or Colombia, for example, totally unbanked, but with a purchasing power of over $800 billion. And for these guys, 70% of the payments were done through cash. So it was the principal means of payment for 70% of the people was still cash before COVID. Then COVID happened, and so lockdowns and social distances reversed the trend. So you can see here the percentage of transactions in cash in 2010 were 86%, and the estimate for last year is dropping to 74%. But again, if you compare to the more mature markets, this is still cash is still very massive compared to other markets. And so the response of the government, this Auxílio Emergencial, was basically 300 billion reais in emergency aid, which was paid to over 68 million Brazilians. And this was done all through a digital account. So if you can see this image here is the Caixa Econômica Federal, which is the second largest public bank in Brazil. They issued this emergency aid through an account that people had to download an app, register there, and they created a virtual debit card, which then they could use online. So what this happened is 73% drop in unbanked population in Brazil. So we were seeing here 45 million unbanked. Now we're talking about 16 million. But there's an interesting story to this. Is this was aid done on a digital account with a virtual debit card. But what happened to that money? Where is that money being spent? And this is the interesting part, is that this aid still found its way to cash. So there was a 30% increase in the demand of paper money in 2020. And this is an interesting quote that we in RecargaPay can relate to. It is a quote from the CEO of Prosegur Cash in Brazil is, even though Brazilians have been bankerized, they still like paper money. And the vast majority of the Auxílio Emergencial, of this aid, was actually withdrawn through an ATM. And this is also very interesting. In the middle of the pandemic, where you would imagine cash disappearing from transactions, Brazil launched an even higher denomination note. The higher used to be 100 reais, and now they launched at 200 reais. Again, because of the demand for paper money. And we can relate here in RecargaPay because we saw how people were starting to add their debit card from the Auxílio Emergencial into wallets like RecargaPay and others. And then from there, trying to withdraw to paper cash because the virtual card from Caixa didn't allow people to withdraw directly. So again, even though there was this huge effort to bankrupt people, this still found its way to cash. And so this goes to say that cash is very sticky in Brazil. So we'll need to see what happens after the pandemic is over and after this emergency aid is being disbursed, because there's still one more payment to be done. But I see, personally, I see that cash is going to be around for quite a while. Having said that, of course, digital payments did thrive through COVID. So despite this resistance from cash, we see growth, and almost 50% of total household consumption now is being done through credit cards, or credit and debit cards, sorry. Total payments volume with cards grew 50% in the last year. You can see here, very interestingly, prepaid cards are growing over 200%. And debit cards, of course, grew a lot because that's where all the money of the subsidized from the government were given. Card not present transactions, so e-commerce, m-commerce, grew 40% year over year, reverting a trend of about 20-25% yearly growth, and small slump in the beginning of COVID. And now contactless, we can see finally growing massively, almost 500% last year, and representing about 10% of total credit card volume. So one of the promises of contactless growing is now actually happening because of COVID. And then finally, I think this is the more interesting thing of what is happening in Brazil, which is PIX, instant payments. For those of you who don't know, PIX is the state-owned system that allows 24/7 transactions between people and companies. It's free for end users, and payments can be done either via QR codes, payment links, or what is called, they call chaves. Basically is an alias, which can be your document, your telephone number, your email, or random. And so this allows multiple ways of payment for peer-to-peer, from peer to merchants, so you can buy things in retail. Companies can pay each other, avoiding the wire transfers, and people can also pay the government for taxes, fines, etc. And so this rapidly gained adoption. So traditionally, how you send money between companies or to pay for services was through TED and DOC, which is basically wire transfer. As you can see here, this was launched in November. This was launched in November 2020. And now it's already representing 60% of total transactions of this credit transfers are being done through PIX. But there's still a lot of room to grow because the volume, the total amount of money transacted through TED, so traditional wire transfer, is still 6x compared to PIX. You can see PIX starting to grow in volume of money, but still it's very, very limited. And you can see this why, because still 75% of PIX transactions are peer-to-peer. Peer-to-merchant transactions and transactions between companies are still relatively small compared to peer-to-peer. And I think here is one of the key messages is there's a lot of work to be done by the retail network to accept PIX payments. I always say that payments is about habits, and habits are sticky. So people are used to paying with cash. People are used to paying in cards in stores. Adding a new payment method through a QR code will take some time to really adopt. On the other hand, transactions done via a mobile app from the bank or a fintech company where you are sending money through a wire transfer, it's so much easier, faster, and cheaper to do it via PIX, and that's why the adoption has been so huge for those type of transactions. And so what's next, right? So what do we see for the future? And again, there's this secular tailwinds of cash going mobile, but what we see in Brazil is that the central bank is really being a massive player in driving a new technology and driving disruption. And now the next phase is open banking combined with PIX. So the first stage of open banking was basically to enable interchange of data between participants in the system. So basically, you could open up your information and you can share the information with all the participants of open banking. But now the second stage is that you are going to be able to initiate transactions via PIX. So as you can see, a client can go to a company that's going to be called payment initiator, which basically through PIX APIs can withdraw money from any account in other financial institution and then do the payment. So this is very interesting because now really it all depends on the product, right? No more silos where the bank or a financial institution controls the whole journey of the customer. Now customers can choose when and where to do their payments, funding it from whatever source they want through Pix, and then using their app of choice to do the payment. And again, there's a lot of new things coming on the Pix front. So now, first stage of Pix was pretty much a substitution of wire transfers and QR code payments in store. Now, Pix Saque, it's the substitution of ATM networks, where you're going to be able to send the Pix to withdraw money from a physical location. Another one is Pix Cobranza, which is basically substituting the boleto bancario. Again, a very, very old and very highly adopted payment method in Brazil. Pix Garantido is going to be the substitution of the credit card, where you are going to be able to issue a Pix and pay for that installments, and the issuing bank is going to guarantee those payments the same way as a credit card. And also now a new initiative is what's called QR Pagador, which is basically a substitution of a prepaid card. It's going to be a preloaded QR code that users are going to be able to use anywhere until the balance is maxed out. So again, a lot of opportunities coming in the payment space in Brazil. But I always say cash is very sticky. So any player coming into the payment market in Brazil need to have a look on how do we handle cash, because it's still going to be a very massive payment method in the mix of payments in Brazil. And that's it for me.
Gustavo, thank you very much. Gustavo, thank you. We have a couple of questions from the audience. I think one you've just more or less answered now, but it's a really, really simple, basic one. Given everything you've talked about and given your knowledge and experience over the past decade, what do you think are the biggest challenges to drive mobile payments in Brazil? We've heard about the unbanked number of people, the equivalent population, I think you mentioned, of Argentina, the 45 million people. But what do you think are the number one challenges other than that, from your perspective and experience?
So what I see number one challenge has always been trust. Brazil is a low trust society. And so people traditionally, and especially in bank, if you see number of polls and surveys being asked, there's a lot of distrust of financial institutions. So I think, again, even though, as you saw in what I saw, that people were getting money through a digital account and they were trying to take that to cash, there is some stickiness. Some people are staying with the digital experience. I think that there's a lot of financial education to be done to this lower segments of the population to actually understand the benefits. I think that this trend is being reversed. Again, a lot of money being dispersed and a lot of that found its way to cash, but it's part of what's going to be happening, right? I think that the massive network of different institutions being in place now with Pix, I think that the central bank is also helping to create this ecosystem. I think it's more of how do companies instruct customers to adopt these new payment methods.
Fantastic. We have another question from Luana Lunacena at Intis Telecom, asking specifically about Pix. Even with Pix being the leader in transferring money, do you think cash will still be the leader, even if Pix really, really makes that big push?
I think Pix will continue to thrive, and I'm very bullish on this here, on the adoption of retail. I think retail is a little bit slower than technology, that the adoption of Pix, in sense, because if you see, most retail networks already have all their systems in place to accept cash and to accept credit cards. It's hard to enter a new payment method, and then they need all the reconciliation of that and the fund cash management of that. I think it's going to take a little bit longer, but there are a lot of players tapping into that. Once the retail network realizes that Pix is faster and cheaper for them than the traditional credit debit card options, I think there's going to be a massive adoption from the retail. And that, I think, is going to be driving most of the growth from Pix. I think this first stage is the natural evolution of there's a new way to do wire transfer, which is cheaper and faster, which is PIX instead of TED. That's a no-brainer. I think the second one is going to be, there's an easier and faster and cheaper way to pay in retail that it's going to be through QR codes. It's going to be no-brainer.
Fantastic, Gustavo. We've got quite a few questions, but you mentioned trust. Security comes in there. How secure is PIX, and will that really change the landscape forever?
Yes, so I think that was one of the interesting debates in the beginning of PIX, is how fraud is going to be tackled, because most of you that do payments in Brazil know that fraud is always an issue. What the protocols did is basically they rely on the banks and on the financial institutions' security measures. So in order to initiate a PIX transaction, you need to be fully verified on that financial institution. So you have to go through all the hoops and all the layers of security of the banks, which traditionally include fingerprint and include various amount of tokens or passwords, etc. So for now, there hasn't been any massive security breaches, but I think account takeover in general is the biggest risk for everyone in the payment space right now.
Okay, Gustavo, thank you very much for your keynote today, and thanks to our audience for being so involved and so active with the questions. And that's the end of our time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Thank you
all the best.